it is important to focus some teachings on the young. On the day of judgment, of those to be shaded are the youths that grew up in obedience to God. Of that narration, we also have the just government official, those attached to the places of worship where only God is worshipped, those who meet only for the sake of God, someone who has turned down the very attractive seductress because they were God-fearing, and those who conceal of the charity that they give, to the point that one would say the metaphor might mean that they don't know all the charity that they've given. In the second narration, we have that fear and hope when they're for God, then they coexist. A lot of people talk about qualities that don't coexist, that they kind of shift back and forth. But Deepak Chopra and individuals like that don't get the exceptions. Those who can afford to should marry, and those that can't should do extra fasting. Now, the most prominent examples of such are the 13th, 14th, and 15th of each month. Except for the 12th month, where the 13th would be one of those 4 days where fasting is forbidden. And the Mondays and Thursdays, except for when they fall on Eid. There are people who memorize Al-Quran, or they become proficient in reciting it. And they should keep a pace that they can keep up, like once through in a month, people will spend reading. Some a week. But every day is, at least to some audiences, too much. There are people that you can meet that will spend 9-10 hours a day at night saying it quickly in their, optional times. Abdullah bin Amr was told to limit it to once a week. And at one point, I was able to listen to Quran through in once a week and actually keep it up. But, as far as determined that this was going to be my practice, I didn't think that was going to be the case. Certainly when you're on retreat and you have a CD player and you're left alone, you can end up making it more than that. Because I think that Ramadan I may have reached 6 times that month. But there's another narration where somebody was limited to once every 3 days. Focus most on the rights of God. All the people will not be able to change your destiny for good or bad. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, does that make us fatalist? No, because people have their choices with their opportunities. So therefore, God knowing and God having the final say doesn't mean there aren't results in this world for the deeds of people. When you're spreading the religion, first call people to monotheism. And then, of course, they say the rest of the testimony. Then you call them to the prayer and the obligatory alms. And you should beware of the oppressed and the needy in terms of what they may supplicate. At Ali's house, there was a visit from Prophet Muhammad, and they tried to stand up, and they couldn't, but the Prophet told them, hey, stay in your beds, don't worry. And the request was because there were some prisoners of war, and they wanted help out because Fatima's hands were getting calloused and hurting and all that. And she was told something better. And that something better is the tasbih of Fatima, where you say glory to God 33 times, all praise to God 33 times, and God is greater than, whatever, 33 times. Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. Muawiyah bin Abu Sufyan, I guess it's a regular S, Sufyan, wanted Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas to revile Ali ibn Talib. And he said there was reasons from during the lifetime of Muhammad that he remembered that he would not do so. One is that Ali was to Muhammad like Aaron was to Moses, except that there's no messenger prophet after Muhammad. And so we think about that for a second, right? Maybe that means Najul Balagha, if that is anywhere near as authentic a text as it seems to be, makes that sort of an official explanation, because Harun was to help Musa convey the message, and Ali was definitely listed as one of those who, like the verse says, withheld believing and acting. Well, I mean, if you read the verse in 21:27, is that the verse? I'm not sure about the number, but it indicates that these people withhold until they know the approval. And so that's become an ideal among certain Sufi groups and Shia groups that you do not believe or act until you've regarded the pleasure of God. On the day of the Battle of Khaybar, Ali was the standard bearer. The verse about summoning of the family to join in the prayerful issue, Ali was one of those. Fatima, Hassan, Hussein also. People will consider that Prophet Muhammad could be told that he would be forgiven for his past and future sins in this life, and therefore people didn't think that they had to just stick to his example. But he did not fast every day. He didn't pray the whole night, but also slept. And he married. There was people that were saying that they were going to skip all three of those. They were going to pray the whole nights. They were going to, but obviously your body has rights on you. And making a point to regularly not sleep at night and to fast every day can be too hard on it. So you do need to kind of alter back and forth. And particularly as you get older, eating all your food in a shorter period of time may start being an issue. You don't want to just give up on the good deeds that you got used to in your youth when you get older. We are to remember that our states fluctuate and that some things seem to be of the world, but they are necessary. Love the poor and be close to them. Consider the inferior in status and not the superior. Avoid begging. Be kind to family and tell the difficult truths. Don't be afraid of critics. Someone was remarking about how I'm sensitive, and I'm like, I just remarked that they banned me on some Reddit platforms. I didn't say that I was like, falling for their thing, right? Because I've promoted videos and stuff in the past on Reddit, and a lot of downvotes if you don't agree with whatever thing you're doing. And now it's, if you don't support political parties all the time and everything, then therefore, oh, we don't see that you're supporting our political party. It's like, I thought this group wasn't about that. But, people will downvote you and even ban you. We need to constantly, or very frequently, affirm that might and power are God's. The mark, they belong to God. Nothing has power without God's permission. There's the listening to and obedience of those in power, regardless of their origins in terms of station in society or ancestry. And we should stay on the way of the rightly guided leaders. So, as far as their rightly guided successors, then that's a way that we can be upon. And we should beware of invention, because that which goes outside of the religion is the going astray. And as the frequently cited saying goes, and it's thrown back on them if it's not part of the religion. And, then it's going towards the hellfire. To worship only God is easy, but great. And relatively, we can say, too, that other than just the obligatory prayers, the giving of one's alms out of what's extra, the fasting of Ramadan, and the pilgrimage to Mecca, and otherwise we can say that the fasting prevents the bad deeds. Charity does away with bad deeds. Now, it puts out the impact of them on the spiritual platform. And one of the things that we should say about that is, don't do deeds of commission at a mission thinking that, oh, well, I can do the atonement for it. It's like, yeah, don't do that. And especially, it's like, why? For the sake of others, or, because you just feel hungry or thirsty. And you go a couple hours without eating, you go hungry, you feel hungry or thirsty. That doesn't mean you can't fast. And then you have to fast 2 months to make up for it. Or, it's a whole lot easier just to do things than to, go through the atonement for it. And in Surah 32 is, of course, the reference regarding the getting up at night for extra prayers. And they call it tahajjud because you've rested or slept and then you get up. After the 5 pillars, one of the things to teach people in regards to what Islam is like we see at the end of the 2nd chapter of Al-Quran. We believe in God. We believe in the light beings. We believe in the scriptures that God has sent. Not the fragmented and distorted ones of previous nations, but actually what God has sent. Judgment Day, the prophets, the prophets of God, Rasulullah, Nabiullah. We are to believe in the resurrection. We are to believe in the divine decree. And so, again, God has the final say. And you see through the laws of nature how some things are going to come through that way. And of course, one of the things that we're to remember along the way is the ending of humanity. And the ending of humanity has certain signs, like shepherds becoming arrogant and doing their displays in tall buildings. And one of the regions specifically talked about, we do see that even people who are considered to be Muslim and by all legal extents are, they're, pridefully making displays even with their Ramadan. You see people that become as masters of their parents, despite the lowly status of the parent, to begin with. And you will see people exposed as if naked, or seeing people naked will not be considered a big deal. So literally we can take that in that term. And one of the things we also say is that people will be as if they don't hear, they don't see. But of course, they do have those faculties. They've just, stuff isn't registering. We see this even in places of worship. You have people that, the teaching is right there. How did you miss that? That's not what the verses said. But there'll be the conclusion, or their culture will have the conclusion. I've even seen people in Ramadan listening to the Quran and then conflicting with it because of their traditions in their own countries. One of the things with books like this is that we need to remember that Muhammad never called anybody a pagan or a heathen or a Gentile or an infidel because of difference in religion. And the first thing we see here listed like that is pagan. Pagan is a term used for monotheists by the Catholic Church until 1967. Its origins regard how when the Greeks and the Romans conquered, they would divide the land into work plots. So people would work on the land, they would work the land, and this was how they strategically divided the land. So anybody who gardens, farms, sets up shop, or does their work on their home, other than those people who just mow their lawn or something, they are pagan. So it has nothing to do with religion. And of course, in Islam, the fights were not just, they're pagan, we're fighting them because they're not being fought because they're pagan. They're being fought because they were the persecutors, they were the aggressors, or they were the financiers for that. A lot of people say, that's anti-Semitic. If you, it's like, no, if they organized the war, you should have seen what one of the Rockefellers said about his sons. At that particular time in the 1800s, there was no wars going on in the world except what they were taking part in. Now, in the narration that I'm talking about here is the case of somebody who people thought would have been a person of paradise, but they got injured and killed themselves. So, when Muhammad said before that this person is the sort that would go to hell, that's what was being talked about. Just like the case of Muhammad saying, look at that person, see what they're, because that's a person of paradise. Or however exactly that was narrated. But anyways, the people were to go learn about the religion by following such and such. And they did learn something that was remembered in a way that it wasn't remembered otherwise. You know what I mean? That teaching is most remembered through that story. To, take account of yourself. What have you done that you shouldn't have done? What have you done that you could do better? What could you have done? That sort of stuff. Ibn Abbas used to go hang out with Umar and the veterans at the Battle of Badr. And the reasoning behind this was that Ibn Abbas was a person who had a level of knowledge that Umar didn't know more about stuff. Chapter 110 of Al-Quran was understood as when the conquest of Mecca would happen, that Muhammad's death was approaching. Don't rush to kill even snakes. If they're in your home, you can warn them. And it's sometimes permissible to gesture during prayer. You can gesture to people so that they know that you're praying, so you don't, have them go through your prayer space. And by prayer space, I mean, just the space you're saying the prayer in. That's why you mark it off. But some people, occasionally you have to, indicate that. And we should be careful not to jump ahead with our conclusions. Prepare for the end times with your love of God and the prophet of the time and place. Of course, we're in the age of the international prophet, Muhammad. The reason why death is prolonged for a person who is a believer is that they have that extra opportunity to do the inner and outer good deeds. And one shouldn't wish for death, because certainly you don't know if life or death is going to be good for you. There is a supplication that was taught about asking for what is good for you. And of course, obviously, if you're even on your deathbed, not able to get up, saying your prayers as best you can, that could be a lot better for you than, just having passed when it was easier to pass. And as indicated before, even if death seems the undeniable direction, that does not mean that we are in a position where we are going to, do stuff to end it. And the assisted suicide thing is sort of taking advantage, because you hear that they do recommend it, and then again, those people, they get credit for what they've done. They're counted among the murderers, aren't they? If they're out there helping people to murder themselves. In the hereafter, those who have succeeded are, once they've succeeded at the least, they reach a point where they don't have any difficulties. They're kept in their young state. And I know some people preferred the part of their life where they were older to whatever degree, but certainly if they had those joys and all that when they were young enough not to have wrinkles, or whatever the way you're going to phrase that is, that's how it is. And by youth, they mean, a developed youth, not you're all 5 years old again. Because you're not fully able to enjoy life at 5, even if that was your best time too. Hassan and Hussein because of their influence, would be leaders of the youths of paradise. And their father is better than them. The honor paid to elders is a result of honor paid when a youth. And we find that with a lot of ways of society, is that they continue because they were previously done. And so if at any part it's broken up in society, it's very hard to bring back the paying the elders honor and all that. The Prophet once taught a group of youths for 20 days, and they were to go back to their families and teach them and order them, regarding what had been revealed to and inspired through Prophet Muhammad. And that's the thing, too, that a lot of people miss, is that even the younger should be heeded. It's not, well, I'm older, I must know this stuff. It's like, well, what does the religion actually teach? And that becomes the grounds of right and wrong, not the feelings or the traditions of the elders. And another thing about that narration is that we need to remember that the acts of worship are according to how Prophet Muhammad taught them. You can perform pilgrimage on behalf of your parents. Once Prophet Muhammad turned somebody's head, and Ibn Abbas asked about it, and it was because that young man wasn't safe from Satan, and neither was the woman he was looking at. Because the temptation. And we're told elsewhere that when it comes to the gaze, you can be like, well, you've looked, but you don't keep gawking or look again and again and again, that sort of stuff. And people's like, no, we see you, but, the focus should be on the character. Or if one's not pursuing a potential spouse, then it's like, why is it the business to kind of, know about the woman's figure or face or any of that else? Before a person is allowed to move in the judgment day, they're asked about their life, their knowledge, their wealth, their bodily ability, and don't some narrations say their youth? And so we're to take advantage of our opportunities while we have them, or before they change. Because obviously you go from being so young that you can't take care of yourself no matter what, to being so old that you become disabled to the point where you can't take care of yourself either. And so people become losers based on their opportunity, when these opportunities are blessings. Free time is for the ease of goodness. Same thing with health. And some people say, well, I already fulfill certain devotional extras, or studying or helping people or whatever. It's like, well, but what more are you capable of? Even the best of us should seek repentance 100 times a day. You don't have to list things out all the time. You can just say the phrases. Because you need to remember that you may be aware of stuff, you may not be aware of stuff. Either the exact nature of what it is, or that you did anything wrong. So you can continually supplicate like that. And you can do this without ruining your life, as people will call it, over guilt and shame and all that. And shame in Islam isn't really the thing, right? Because it's not ethics that we're looking at, it's morals. So what society thinks of what you've been doing, you shouldn't feel so bad about that. There are natural reactions, but certain feelings are just to prevent stuff and all that. Guilt, shame, and fear do happen, but they're not to keep you from living your life. They're to, enhance the life that you could be living. The best of people are those who live long and live good. And we need to remember that the end of our life is more of how we're judged. So we need to deal with things while we still have more control. Because just as a person lacks some control when they're pre-adolescent in particular, but as an adolescent, you may not be as strong in your hormones as when you're in your 20s and 30s. Well, unless your health collapses or something like that. A lot of people, because their bad habits with diet, or maybe they're just too poor nowadays. More and more people don't even have a choice anymore. But you know what I mean. When people get older, they start losing control too. And after the prayer, asking God to help you in remembering God and worshiping God is a very important thing. Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Be like the tree that produces food and, on normal circumstances, the leaves don't fall. They don't fall with the seasons and that sort of stuff. Invite the non-Muslim youths to monotheism. Invite them towards Islam as a whole, or any part. Now, Muhammad did this when visiting a Jewish family in presence of the father, who said that it was okay for the son to accept Islam. But we do need to spread the faith to all ages. We need to call the dying towards whatever amount of good and truth that we can call them towards. And people say that we're calling someone towards Islam, we mean all good and all truth. Because you look at the Quran in broad form or specific form, anything that is wrong, it's condemned. Anything that is right, it has promoted. So all these people, do you condemn this and that and the other? It's like, we don't have to. We read the Quran, and the Quran indicates that the Prophet explained things. So we look towards that. So we don't have to, your popular and political Islam that you try to claim upon us. Even though if you look at the stuff, it's like, wait a second, even then you find out that there's less of the problems in these countries among the Muslim population of the Western countries. They're going to list, here's a group of criminals that have done this. And it's like, again, And deathbed confessions of faith, if they're authentic, can be saving. Now, if you're passing things around, it's generally best to pass them around on the right side. And sometimes the youngest will be given to drink rather than anybody else. Now that's, when it comes to food, that is typically the way. They make sure the children are fed and their thirst is taken care of, even if there's people who are seniors and all that. But you at least want the idea out there. Oh, child, what about the older ones? I mean, this isn't exactly what was narrated in the thing, but, to that spirit of the narration. But the child, something that you had taken part of, I loved it more, that it would be for me. And so the kid was allowed, because of his faith. You could think that that was implied, but the kid was allowed anyways. And some people are such wise individuals in the service of the greater good as children that there's no reason to ask them why they did something or why they didn't do something. Now, we need to be careful with the women. Whether that's when they're riding in the car or otherwise. We need to be careful how they're being led along. People shouldn't annoy their spouses. Their spouses are like guests. One of the things that we find is pranking, teasing, all that, and people don't think it's a big deal, and maybe it's not treated like a big deal. And maybe that's how you met, is you said mean things to each other, and then you realized you were more compatible through that. It really needs to be curtailed, because that stuff's more hurtful than people realize. Especially because on the spiritual level, at the very least, you could be doing good. Instead of tolerable bad to each other, you could be doing good. When bad things happen, an important thing to remember is that the prophetic lesson of what to do in difficulties. When you eat the nearer portion, particularly when you're sharing stuff with people, and mention God's name over everything worth doing. Particularly the eating, when it comes to some stuff, like if you're going into the place where you go to the bathroom, you say your supplications before you get to the toilet area and all that stuff. So, but when you're eating, you eat and drink in the name of God, or say an appropriate supplication. And if you remember midway or after, you can also supplicate. And a lot of good deeds too. The things that you find in the Hadith, the most important aspect is, okay, what's some teachings to explain Quran, right? You find that you're supposed to do things in the name of God before, after, and during, in one way or another. And you find just general examples of right and wrong. This book has 44 narrations. We should keep from being angry and impulsive. Did I say you should eat with your right hand? Now, a person is as young when they're old, in how they love the world, and in how they may hope. Getting rumbly in the tumbly here. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but, one thing also is the state in which people enter paradise. That, what you may have to trim and all that during life, none of that's going on. And one reaches paradise at a peak of strength and beauty. You know what I mean? 30, 33, that sort of thing. And they're just as good looking as people who would be considered perfectly made up. It's more loved to be strong in your belief. We should focus on how dear our benefit is, and we should avoid the ifs. Sure, we should repent, but we shouldn't be like, oh, if this was the case, then this would have been the case, or, that sort of stuff.